In the mid-17th century, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was facing both internal and external troubles. First, there was the Cossack uprising in Ukraine, followed by the invasion of the Tsardom of Russia under the Romanov dynasty. This land was engulfed in the flames of war due to the long-standing implementation of noble democracy within the Commonwealth. The king's control over localities and the military was severely weakened, taking advantage of the escalating internal conflicts in Poland. King Charles X Gustav of Sweden brazenly tore up the ceasefire agreement and invaded the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in July 1655. Compared to the disorganized and chaotic Poles, the Swedes had a well-trained army and were well-prepared, making them more capable in battle. Although they had previously been defeated by the Poles in earlier engagements, King Charles X Gustav remained confident. This period of suffering was referred to by the Poles as the Deluge. Shortly after the war began, under the fierce offensive of the Swedes, many local Polish forces were quickly defeated as they tried to escape. Upon hearing the news, Janusz Radziwiłł summoned commanders from various regions to gather in Kidney, including the officer Andrzej Kmysiek, who was well loved by his soldiers for his bravery in battle. Janusz required Andrzej to swear an oath on the cross to remain loyal to him forever, no matter what happened, to be safe. He also brought Andrzej's lover, Olenka, to Kidney. At the evening banquet, Janusz publicly announced that in order to save the country, he had decided to pledge allegiance to the King of Sweden. The commanders were shocked by his words and immediately denounced the prince as a traitor. At this moment, Andrzej realized the reason Janusz had asked him to swear loyalty. The others wanted to resist, but were blocked by the prince's guards, and Janusz then ordered his troops to imprison them. Andrzej was filled with despair, realizing he had sworn loyalty to a traitor. However, Janusz assured Andrzej that he was only pretending to surrender because Poland was currently unable to confront Sweden. The Swedes had a small population and did not have enough manpower to control Poland. Once he obtained the Polish throne and stabilized the domestic situation, he would immediately prepare to fight the Swedes and reclaim lost territory. Naive Andrzej believes him again, and Andrzej thinks he is serving his country. Not long after, in an effort to rescue the imprisoned commanders, some soldiers from the legions openly mutinied. However, due to their small numbers, they were quickly suppressed by Andrzej's forces. To prevent further incidents, Janusz planned to execute the officers. After Andrzej's repeated pleas, Janusz agreed not to kill them, but to hand them over to the Swedes for custody until the war ended. During the escort, the soldiers responsible for guarding them were covertly swayed by the officers. After escaping, they began to form an alliance to oppose the traitorous Janusz. Upon learning of this, Janusz was furious. He arranged for Andrzej to find his brother, Boguslaw Radziwiłł, and to request reinforcements from the Swedes to suppress the alliance. 10 days later, Andrzej arrived in Podlesia, where he met the young Boguslaw Radziwiłł. He was a particular lover of beauty, and he indulged in a paper-thin life every day. During their conversation, the prince inadvertently revealed the truth. It turned out that Janusz did not want to save Poland at all. He had surrendered to Sweden for his own political gain. At that moment, Andrzej was utterly despondent, realizing he had been serving a traitor all along. In order to make up for his mistake, Andrzej stole his secret letter, and then he pretended to ask Boguslaw to help raise his horse, and took the opportunity to invite him to go out horseback, riding together. Thus, Andrzej and his men kidnapped Boguslaw. He planned to hand Boguslaw over to the alliance and expose Janusz's treachery to the Polish people. However, Boguslaw was also capable. He took advantage of the distraction to knock Andrzej down, dealt with the soldiers, and successfully escaped. Due to his injuries, Andrzej fell unconscious, and his subordinates dragged him to a safe place to recover. Meanwhile, the fleeing Boguslaw Radziwill had arrived in Kiezdany. Janusz also knows that Andrei has something on himself and his cousin, but he's not worried about it. He knew that Andrei would not dare to reveal this information publicly, especially since his beloved girl was still in his possession. Upon hearing Janusz's words, Boguslaw became immediately interested. He used various means to pursue Olenka, but she remained devoted to Andrei. By October 1655, in just 3 months, the Swedish army had occupied most of Poland, forcing King Jan II Kazimierz to seek refuge in Silesia. If the situation continued to deteriorate, Poland would face annihilation. To this end, Andrei and his subordinates decided to seek refuge with the king. Meanwhile, Janusz and Boguslaw were not in a good position either. The growing strength of the alliance troubled them greatly. The two decided to request reinforcements from the Swedish king and arrange for Boguslaw Radziwill to take Olenka to Tloxi to recruit soldiers. Thus, Boguslaw led his troops to Tloxi, where the small town lit fireworks to welcome his arrival. However, while returning to his room, a soldier accidentally splashed fireworks onto the gunpowder, causing an explosion. The prince immediately ordered the execution of the officer in charge of the fireworks, Bohun, but Olenka's plea saved his life. On the other side, Andrei and his men witnessed the atrocities committed by the Swedes against Poland on their way to Silesia. The land was scorched and many innocent civilians lay dead. By chance, Andrei discovered the convoy of the Swedish envoy. He overheard that the Swedes were planning to attack the monastery at Mount Chenstokhova. Andrei informed the people at the monastery, but initially the clergy and nobles did not believe him. It was only after he presented the spoils taken from the Swedish army that they began to trust his words. The monastery then began to fortify its defenses according to Andrei's suggestions, preparing to repel the Swedish invasion. On October 18, 1655, Andrei led his men and the monks of the monastery into battle against the Swedish army. This became known as the Battle of Chenstokhova. According to historical records, the clergy at the monastery had already prepared for resistance 2 months before the battle. They had funded the purchase of nearly 30 cannons, stocked ample ammunition, and recruited mercenaries and volunteers, including monks from the monastery who could fight. After a prolonged artillery exchange, the Swedish king Gustav became furious at the lack of progress and ordered the army to bring in giant cannons. At the moment the cannons fired, a section of the monastery's wall was blown to pieces. Despite having held out for many days, the monastery could only last 1 more day against the giant cannons. Facing this dire situation, the only option was to destroy the cannons. At night, when the Swedish soldiers were not looking, Andrei slipped under the cannon, lit the gunpowder, and stuffed it into the barrel. With a loud explosion, the Swedish giant cannon was destroyed. After a month-long siege, the Swedes still could not the monastery at Chenstokhova. Reluctantly, King Gustav of Sweden had to withdraw his troops. From a military perspective, this battle had minimal impact on the Swedes, but this victory gave the Poles their first sense of hope. From then on, the Poles officially sounded the horn for counterattack. By the end of 1655, Janusz died under the heavy artillery fire of the alliance. In his final moments, he was tormented by illness and worry, while Boguslaw spent his days in indulgence, completely ignoring Janusz's pleas for help. Meanwhile, Andrei arrived in Silesia to meet King Jan II. He briefed the king's ministers on the situation at the monastery. Seeing Andrei's bravery, the king decided to keep him by his side to serve him. With the domestic situation looking up, it was a good time for the king to return to Poland. On the way, they encountered a Swedish patrol. Andrei, disregarding his own safety, charged into the fray. Fortunately, upon hearing the sounds of battle, nearby Polish armed forces joined the fight. After a fierce struggle, the Swedish army was defeated. At the same time, due to his unrequited love for Olenka, Boguslaw gradually lost patience. Fortunately, Bohun arrived just in time and knocked Boguslaw unconscious. In the following days, the Polish army continued to engage the Swedes with more and more local armed forces. Joining Janusz's camp, many legions were conducting guerrilla warfare against the Swedes, which kept Gustav busy. The Swedish army was forced to retreat from Warsaw, burning bridges along the way, but they still could not stop the fierce attacks from the Polish cavalry. During this period, the king received Crimean Tatar envoys. They had formed an alliance and were preparing to jointly confront the Swedish army. In October 1656, the Battle of Warsaw officially began. The Polish-Tatar coalition faced the Swedish-Prussian coalition at Proski. Although the Polish side had more troops, they lacked infantry and artillery compared to their opponents. Once preparations were complete, the Polish army launched their attack. Andrei led the Tatar forces into the enemy lines, followed closely by the Polish winged hussars, who crossed the river and engaged in fierce combat. Boguslaw immediately ordered the artillery to attack the Polish main position across the river, but the cannons lacked the range and failed to hit the Poles. Subsequently, Jan II commanded the light cavalry to cross the river and assault the enemy. With the battle horn sounding, the light cavalry launched a fierce attack on the enemy. On the other side, a large number of Polish cavalry charged toward the Swedish lines. The Swedes quickly defended themselves with rifles and spear units. They took down many cavalrymen but could not stop the relentless advance of the Polish forces. Before long, with the courageous fighting of the Polish legions, they defeated the enemy with minimal losses. Seeing the situation deteriorate, Boguslaw Radziwiłł quickly fled. However, before the prince could get far, he was caught up with by Andrei. In a quest for revenge, Andrei engaged him in a duel. After several rounds of combat, Boguslaw was knocked off his horse. Boguslaw deceived Andrei, claiming that if he died, Olenka would also be killed. Reluctantly, Andrei spared his life. Worried about Olenka's safety, Andrei prepared to head to Tloxi to rescue her. But after a moment's thought, he returned to the ranks. After all, in a time of national crisis, he could not focus solely on his personal feelings. By the winter of 1658, Olenka had successfully returned to her territory. On her way, she suddenly spotted a familiar figure. Hurrying to check, she found that it was Andrei. They once again sat closely together on a sled, just as they had when they first met.